Welcome to Everything Health, produced by the A. Philip Randolph Institute. This evening, we'll be discussing healthcare in America. So please sit back and enjoy, and at any time during the show, you can post a question by simply using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your Zoom application. And your question could be featured during our Q&A segment later in the show. Once again, welcome, and sit back and enjoy as we start the show.
Good evening, A. Philip Randolph Institute family and friends. Thank you for joining us this evening for this week's segment of Everything Health. Now, we hope that you brought a friend along because this is going to be a very interesting, educational, and thought-provoking discussion. Our guest this evening is Mr. Vernon L. Williams, MS, and he will be helping us to start a journey along a path of spirituality and health. Mr. Williams earned a master's degree in applied behavior science from the Johns Hopkins University. He is the author of 7 books. So he is also has 3 online courses. One, Never Worry Again, Stop Negative Thoughts, and Prevent Work Stress. Through his books, online courses, life coaching, speaking, and blogging, Vernon helps people overcome their problems and live a joyful and healthy life. Now, before I turn it over to Brother Williams, I want to remind our audience that your questions and comments are welcome. Please place them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen or the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to my brother, Vernon L. Williams.
Well, thanks so much, Fred. It's really a delight to be here. I'm so excited to talk with us about this subject that is so near and dear to me. God wants us to be healthy. He tells us in 3 John 1:2 that I pray that you may enjoy good health. So that's what God's desire is for us, that we would have good health. But yet many of us often experience that we do not have good health. In fact, we have a multitude of health problems. So what we want to do tonight is to discuss reasons for the gap between what God desires for us and what we actually experience in our day-to-day lives as far as our health is concerned. I call the talk Think Better, Be Healthier, and we're going to discuss strategies for doing that.
Yep, you may have to click into the first slide just to get it there and then hit enter. There
Okay.
you go.
There we go. Okay. So a major finding that is really kind of astonishing is that 75 to 98% of mental, physical, and behavioral illnesses comes from one's thought life. In other words, negative thinking. This is from Dr. Caroline Leaf, a neuroscientist who spent the last 30 years studying the relationship between the mind and the brain and our body and how it all works and impacts our health. And Proverbs 4:23 says, be careful how you think. Your life is shaped by your thoughts. So let's look now at the process of how negative thoughts works, okay? So the first thing is we'll have a thought, and that leads to a feeling. And then that impacts our health, which leads to behavior, which winds up producing a result. Now let's look at an example. Let's say that I have the thought, I'm never going to be able to save money for retirement. So immediately I start to feel helpless. I feel discouraged. I feel defeated. Now, in terms of my health, I could start to have headaches. I could have infections, because one of the things negative thinking does is diminish our immune system, which is in place to keep us from getting infections. So I could then start getting infections, irritable bowel syndrome, upset stomach, diarrhea, constipation, high blood pressure. These are some of the health impacts that I could experience as a result of the negative thought. In terms of behavior, I could wind up blaming. Maybe I'll blame my spouse. You know, if I were married to a different person, I'd be able to save more money. I could blame the economy. You know, you just can't get ahead in this economy. I may even blame my employer. You know, I have such a lousy employer, and that's why I'm never able to save any money. And of course, the result is you don't save any money, which confirms the thought. That's called a self-fulfilling prophecy, where we think I'm never going to be able to save money. And then we engage in behavior that ensures that, in fact, we do not save money. So now let's look at what happens with a positive thought. Okay, it's the same process: the thought, the feeling, the health, the behavior, and the result. But let's look at an example, another example of a positive thought as opposed to the negative thought. Let's say the thought is, I am good at earning and saving money. Now I feel empowered. I feel confident. I feel relaxed. I feel encouraged. In terms of the impact on my health, this is from the Mayo Clinic that outlines some of the health benefits that come as a direct result of positive thinking. Increased lifespan, lower rates of depression, lower stress, greater resistance to the common cold, better cardiovascular health, reduced risk of death from cardiovascular disease. Now, unlike before, my behavior is completely different now. Maybe I'll establish a budget. Maybe I will start to look at spending money on my needs instead of on my wants. And maybe I would even set up a payroll deduction plan. The result is 10% of my salary now goes into my 401k, and the company matches that with another 10%. So you can see the difference, even though the process in terms of thought, feeling, health, behavior, and result, that process always plays out. And studies show that the average person can have as many as 60,000 thoughts per day. And so that's a lot of thoughts, and 80% of those have been shown to be negative. And so the impact of negative thoughts is immense on our health and, of course, our behavior and our results. The Bible, interestingly enough, has something to say on the impact of positive thoughts. Proverbs 17:22 says, being cheerful keeps you healthy. It is a slow death to be gloomy all the time. Now, at this point, you may have a couple of questions. You've seen the difference between negative thoughts and positive thoughts and the impact they each have on our health. So you may have a couple of questions. One, can a person learn to think positive thoughts? Well, I can tell you positively that the answer is a resounding yes, a person can learn. And the second question you may ask is, can you show me how to do that? And the answer is by stopping negative thoughts. 3 verbs: capture, ask, replace. The Bible says that we need to renew our minds. For years and years and years, the belief was that we're born and our minds, our brains develop, and then at a certain point in time, the development stops. Our brains are set the way they're going to be. Well, scientific studies have proven that that is not the case. In fact, there's a whole new field of study called neuroplasticity. Neuro meaning brain, plasticity meaning malleable. In other words, we can reform, we can change our brain. And again, I was talking earlier about science finally catching up with what the Bible has been saying for years. And as I mentioned before, in Romans 12:2, the Bible says, renew your mind. And renew means to take something out and put something new in. If you had a problem with your electrical system at your house and you hired a contractor, the contractor would come out and do an assessment and would take out the old electrical system or maybe plumbing system or whatever and replace it with new. And that's what the Bible is talking about when it says renew your mind. And that means we have to take control of our thoughts. And the way we take control of our thoughts are those 3 verbs I mentioned: capture, ask, and replace. In fact, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5 says, take each thought captive. Most of us have the habit of just letting our thoughts come into our minds, and we've seen how that process plays out. And so what 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5 says, take each thought captive. It's much like if you made a reservation at a hotel. When you showed up at the hotel, you couldn't just take your baggage and go up to the room. You'd have to check in at the front desk, and there'd be questions, confirming the length of your stay, maybe swiping your credit card. Do you need any help with your baggage or what have you? But you do have to check in. And so what we're talking about here is having each thought check in. That's what we mean by capturing. And then asking, once we've stopped the thought and captured it, then ask ourselves 3 questions. Is this true 100% of the time? Number 2, is this thought helping me accomplish my goals? And number 3, is there a way I can think about this? That's the capture, and then the ask, and then the replace. We want to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. Now let's look at an example. Let's say I have a thought. I can never remember things. I can never remember things. So now we ask ourselves these questions. Is this true 100% of the time? Is having this thought, I can never remember things, helping me accomplish my goals? And number 3, is there another way I can think about this? And then finally, we replace the thought by saying, I forget less than 1% of the time, which does not constitute never. Now, capture, ask the question, and replace. Replacing the thought is very, very important. It's not good enough to simply say, I'm not going to think that thought. Because when we say, I'm not going to think that thought, that's a guarantee that we're going to think that thought. For example, if I said to you right now, whatever you do, do not think of a pink elephant. Do not think of a pink elephant. Don't do it. Over the next couple of minutes, you can think about anything you want, but don't think about a pink elephant. Now, what are you thinking about? A pink elephant. That's just the way the mind works. So, and you're going to keep thinking about a pink elephant until I say to you, okay, stop thinking about the pink elephant. Now I want you to think about a brown bear. And then you'll start thinking about a brown bear. So my point is, we don't want to just say, I'm not going to think about, I can never remember things. I'm going to replace that thought after having asked myself these three critical questions. I hope that is absolutely clear to you. And I want you to remember this. Shad Hemsletter said this: no thought can dwell in your mind without your permission. So if you are thinking negative thoughts, it's because you've given those negative thoughts to take up dwelling inside of your mind. And you can learn how to, by using these steps, capture, ask, and replace, you can learn how to not have those thoughts that are negative, that are impacting your health and also impacting your ability to achieve your goals. You can replace those thoughts with thoughts that are empowering. Now let's summarize what we've discussed so far. We've said that 75 to 98% of illnesses come from one's thought life. In other words, 75 to 98% of the illnesses that we have are self-induced. Self-induced. The other thing is we can learn to think healthy thoughts. And finally, healthy thoughts lead to a healthier life. Now, stopping negative thoughts requires practice, or as Allen Iverson would say, practice. We have to practice that. So let's look at what I have developed, and Fred mentioned this in the opening. I've developed 3 premium courses, and the one that's germane here is called Stop Negative Thoughts. And what this course does is identify the various types of negative thoughts. All negative thoughts fit into a category or a type. For example, labeling yourself. We might say, I'm a failure as a husband or as a wife or as a parent. That's called labeling yourself. Another type is fortune telling. I've always been this way. I'll never be able to change. That's fortune telling. Another type is catastrophizing. If I don't perform my job well, I'm going to get fired. So those are just 3 of the types. And I mentioned 13 type categories or types of negative thoughts in this premium course. So this course will, number 1, allow you to identify the various types. Number 2, it will enable you to practice, to recognize your specific types of negative thoughts that you use. And number 3, through the worksheets, you will actually be able to apply the CAR method, the capture, ask questions, and replace negative thoughts. And you can download this course at my website, vernonlwilliams.com. So that leaves us at a point of questions that we need to ask ourselves right now. Question number 1, can I take control of my thoughts? This speaks to ability. Do I have the ability to take control of my thoughts? Well, we know that you have the ability. All of us have the ability. How do we know that? Because the Bible says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me the strength. All things. So in other words, I can do everything, including taking control of my thoughts. The Bible has already said we need to renew our minds. The Bible has already said, be careful how you think, because your life is controlled by your thoughts. So now the Bible is telling us I can do all things, including controlling my thoughts. The second question is, will I? I know I can. Now the question becomes, will I? Now this is a question of attitude. Mark Batterson said, you are one decision away from a completely different life. This is decisions determine destiny. Decisions are so crucial. The word decide comes from the Latin word decidere, which means cut off from. So when you decide that you're going to control your thoughts, you are cut off from just allowing thoughts to come into your mind and control your life, because you're going to be the one in control. So it's your turn now. Questions. I'd love to hear from you, to answer any questions that you have.
All right, we're at the point now where we can start taking questions. Mr. Williams, sometimes it takes a second for everybody to get their thoughts together. We do have one question
Okay.
from Tamika Mason. She says, after having negative thinking for so long, causing subsequent stress and health issues, can adapting positive thinking and an improved lifestyle reverse some of these health issues?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I go back to what I said earlier about the findings from the Mayo Clinic. Increased lifespan, lower rates of depression. It can actually, having positive thoughts can actually reduce the amount of depression that people experience. Because keep in mind, I said earlier that we can have as many as 60,000 thoughts per day, and 80% of them are negative. That's 48,000 negative thoughts per day that are just going through our minds. There's a term called ruminating, which means just going over the same thoughts over and over again. Because I mentioned 80% of the thoughts are negative, 95% are repeated. And that's where a lot of the problems come. We're repeating the same thoughts. We're ruminating. We're just keep going through the same thing over and over again. So to answer the question, to reverse that, to renew our minds, to start thinking positive thoughts, our immune system gets better. We don't get as many infections. We feel better. And again, Proverbs 17:22 says, a cheerful heart extends our life, so that's the way it goes. So absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, and I have a question myself. I want to find out if I can get a copy of one of your books, and if Mr. Mason can grab it for me, and if you can sign it. I want to take a look at that top 7 myths that perpetuate stress and how to dispel them.
Yes.
The topic alone, or the title alone, has definitely piqued my interest. And what I would
Yeah.
like to do, Mr. Mason, is if we can post the books and the titles, and see if we can get copies, because just listening to what you had to say today, I'm a personal trainer, and everything that you said was so relevant to what I tell my clients when I work out with them, trying to
Yeah.
motivate them and try to keep them
Yeah.
focused, and staying on point with just, their health, staying healthy and working
Yeah.
out. And
Yeah.
and some of the quotes you mentioned were great, because this is one of my best ones that I tell people is, the moment you give up is the moment you let someone else win. And that's
Yeah.
a quote from Kobe Bryant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I tell a lot of my clients when they start working out with me. I'm like, look, the moment you give up is the moment
Mhm.
you let your health down and you let, someone else win. you get sick. All right, so we do have one more question from
Yeah.
Bert. Uh, can this positive thinking process also benefit with folks who are clinically depressed and are on anxiety medication? Sorry, Bert, I misread that. Did you get that, Mr. Williams?
Okay. Now keep in mind, I am not a physician. In fact, on my website, I say I'm not a physician. I don't even play one on TV. So I don't pretend to treat depression. What I can tell you is that there have been a number of studies done with people who have been depressed all their lives. And keep in mind, what often leads to depression is ruminating. I grew up on a farm and there were cows around, and cows would eat some grass and then they would just keep chewing it and chewing it and chewing it. And then they would swallow it, and then they would regurgitate it and chew it some more. And they would just keep doing that. And there have been a number of studies where people who've been depressed for years and years and years, and through applying the kinds of stuff I'm talking about, cognitive behavioral therapy based stuff, and having people take control of their thoughts. And each time a negative thought comes into their mind, challenging it and replacing it with a positive thought. There have been a number of studies that have shown that people who had been depressed for years are no longer depressed. Just the other thing too, there used to be this belief that the body and the mind were separate. But the reality of it is what affects the mind also affects the body. In fact, there's a great quote that I love is, what the mind dwells upon, the body acts upon. Ms. Brown.
Vernon,
Yes.
typically around January the 1st of every year, many of us make resolutions, think
Yes.
that we have made a decision to be better, to be
Yeah.
healthier. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I love it because what happens is in good faith, I mean, people are standing there and they're saying, it's a brand new year, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to stop smoking, or I'm going to start saving more money. And do you know that studies have shown that by the end of January, only 8% of the people who made resolutions have kept them by the end of January. And so my theory is they have not made a decision. They have made what I call wishcraft. I've made a wish. I wish I could stop drinking. I wish I could stop smoking. I wish I could save more money or whatever. I'm telling you, as Mark Batterson said, you're one decision away from a completely different life. And a decision is way different from expressing a wish. All of us have wishes. I wish I were whatever. I wish I could lose weight. I wish whatever. But the fact of the matter is, once you decide, that's why I mentioned before, decide comes from the Latin word decidere, which means cut off from. So if I decide that I'm not going to smoke, then smoking is not an option for me. I'm cut off from doing that. Or if I decide that I'm not going to eat all of this processed food, then that's not something that's available to me. I'm cut off from doing that. So I'm telling you, decisions determine destiny. And there's a big, big difference between a decision and a wish.
I noticed that a number of your books have either time periods or a certain number of steps to them, 13 steps, 21 days. What's the purpose of that?
Well, number one, it helped me in writing the books to organize it to say, there's going to be 13 of these things, right? So because otherwise I could have just kept going. So that limited me. And then, of course, doing research and identifying specific steps. Many of them were repeated, so it was helpful to kind of say, okay, let's instead of keep repeating the same thing, let's consolidate some of these or whatever. And then it gives people a sense of, okay, I can do 5 things, or I can do 10 things, or whatever, as opposed to this unlimited thing. So I want to give people encouragement to, this is something I can do. And in terms of changing our thoughts, we can actually do that. And through practicing, we can get to a point where we have literally renewed our mind, which is what the Bible says. We have gotten into a whole new mindset. And I'll be honest with you right now, I can't think negative thoughts. when I try, it just can't. You know what? Because I have, as Allen Iverson says again, I practice. Because, and they say it takes 63 days to actually get that into your system, But, and Dave can attest to this, when he's training somebody physically, you can't go to the gym one time and have a great workout and then say, okay, mission accomplished, I'm down. You got to keep going. And that's what separates people who are successful from people who aren't successful, is that people who are successful realize that there's no easy road. It takes sacrifice. It takes repetition. I was listening to a guy talking about Tom Brady's trainer was talking today and said, now here's a guy that's the greatest quarterback of all time. But today he'll get up in the morning and he's got a routine, and then he meets with his trainer, and then he goes to practice. And then after practice, he meets with his trainer again and goes to another. This is every single day, right? This is the greatest quarterback of all time. So, he's not just sitting and munching on some Fritos and saying, man, I hope I can get to be the best quarterback. He's actually putting in the time. So same thing with practicing negative thoughts, overcoming them. It takes practice. Caption them, asking question, replacing. Capture, asking question, replace. Capture, ask questions, replace.
Well, I've got something for you. I believe and I understand what you're saying about negative thoughts resulting in bad health. I believe that clearly. But I don't understand how I can tell these bad knees of mine that I've changed my thought pattern and get it to cooperate every time I want to go upstairs or downstairs, because they scream right back at me. Every day I'm like, okay, I can do this. I know I can do this much better. And I'm making light of it, but I'm really serious. Being able to maintain that change that you're talking about, which you just reiterated,
Yes.
the carb factor, is a tough thing to do, but it is doable because it has worked with everything except these real stubborn knees of mine that don't want to cooperate. So I thank you for that. I thank you very much for that reinforcement just then.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. Here's the way our mind works. We have a thought. Well, let me back up for a minute. If you sit down at your computer and you type a sentence, and then you highlight a word in that sentence, and then you click on the B for bold, right? What's it gonna do? It's gonna make that you highlight bold, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, why does it do that? It's because it's been given a set of instructions that tells it when you highlight that and click on this, do it bold. And it'll do it not just once, not just twice, it'll do it every single time. Why? Because there's been a program, which is a set of instructions that's been written to cause that to happen. Our minds, the greatest computers that have ever been invented. Because in fact, the physical computers that we have are modeled after our minds. So when we have a thought and we say, you know what, man, every time I go upstairs, my knees are gonna hurt. You know what? Then your body's gonna get busy. Your subconscious is gonna get busy communicating to your knees that they're supposed to hurt every time you go upstairs.
Okay, I get it.
Right? And that's why we got to reprogram. That's what renewing our mind means. Give them a different set of instructions that say, you know, when I go upstairs, I am smooth. I am gliding. You know, I am pain-free. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, I'm gonna glide up those steps tonight then.
I'm telling you, if you know, here's another example. You probably have heard people say, I get a cold every year around this time, right?
Yeah,
Did you know what's gonna happen every year around this time?
they're gonna get it. Okay.
Why? Because they program, you know, if our subconscious doesn't ask us, are you sure you want to do that? If we program our subconscious to get a cold every end of September, it's going to get busy having a cold. Right?
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. If I say, man, I'm terrible at remembering stuff, I'm going to get busy not remembering stuff.
Okay.
That's why it's, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Be careful how you think, because your thoughts control your life. Right?
Yeah, that is so true. I
That's
totally agree.
powerful.
Okay, we got one more question from Brother Bert, which is a follow-up question. It said,
Yes.
is this again another problem that our healthcare system, by just treating folks with pharmaceuticals, depression, anxiety, rather than being more creative with their caregiving?
Yeah. That's, you know, what often happens with health issues is that we treat the symptom and not the cause. Like we mentioned before, that one of the courses that I wrote is called Prevent Work Stress. And so what the course does is show people how to prevent work stress, as the name implies, not manage it. Most stress programs teach you how to manage stress. Listen to music, go to a comedy show. Well, of course, it does. But guess what happens the minute you step out of the comedy show or whatever? You know, you go back to whatever situation and you feel the stress all over again. So the idea is stress doesn't come from what's happening in your life. It comes from what you think about what's happening in your life. And you can control what you think. So again, just like anything else we're talking about here, the thought is what controls it. You change the thought, you change the feeling, you change the feeling, you change the behavior, you change the behavior, you change the result. That's the way it works. And so with the health situation, they're looking at trying to change the result. And that's what people do when they want to lose weight. They're saying, I'm too heavy, I need to lose weight. They focus on that. And then you say, well, why didn't you lose weight? Well, I was on the Slim Fast diet. I was on the South Beach diet, and none of them worked. The reason you had the same thought that led to the behavior that produced the result. So if you want a different result, you got to start at the other end and change the thought that produces the emotion that leads to the behavior that leads to the result. That's just the way it is, 100% of the time, not sometimes, but every time. And again, to your specific question, Dave, we have to, or not have to, we have a choice. We can take control of our health, or we can leave it to a healthcare provider, a doctor, or whomever, you know? And so if we want to be healthy, we've got to change our thoughts. We can't, and that gets into the blaming thing. Blaming, you know, my doctor just keeps giving me one pill after another. My doctor hasn't really helped me get better. That's blame, blame, blame. My idea is to use the CAR method. Capture your thought, ask questions, replace it. Capture the thought, ask question, replace it. Capture the thought, ask question, replace it. That will change your health every time. I don't care what your health situation is.
Vernon, in one of your books, you share with your audience or your readership the experience of your wife who transitioned.
Yes.
And that was very powerful for me to read. You also share the experience about the professional baseball player who ended up having one of his arms amputated, and they were still able to rejoice. So can you comment on how people can feel empowered and rejoiceful when they have a terminal or chronic illness?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So with my wife, by the way, was my high school sweetheart, and then we were married 34 years, and she had a lot of health problems, and then she did, as you mentioned, a transition to heaven. And I was able to rejoice in that circumstance because the Bible says to die is to gain. It says in Psalm 16:11, in your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So I had a choice. I could focus on, oh, this is terrible. My wife is gone, my high school sweetheart, what am I gonna do now? Or I could focus on how happy I was for her. And that continues to make all the difference for me. The fella, Dave, was a pitcher for the Giants. He'd always wanted to be a professional baseball player. And then he became a pitcher, very successful. And then he developed cancer in his pitching arm and wound up having to have his arm amputated. And he said, you know, that was one of the best things that could have happened to him. It gave him a whole new platform for sharing his faith with people. And that was the way he looked at it. And again, it goes back to, there's a verse in the Bible, Philippians 4:8, that says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is praiseworthy, whatever is helpful, focus on those things. We don't get to choose our circumstances, but we do get to choose how we're going to view those circumstances. I use the analogy of, if anybody's ever worn glasses, you know, you go to the ophthalmologist and the ophthalmologist sits you in this chair, puts this thing over your face with different lenses in it, and asks you to look at the chart across the wall. And then the doc will say, is it clearer now or clearer now? And in the meantime, flipping different lenses. And so anyone who's had an eye exam can tell you that that same chart that they're looking at across the wall has a completely different appearance depending on the lens through which you're looking at it. So I tend to look at whatever happens in my life as what an opportunity. I worked for a company for 23 years. I was 2 years away from being able to retire and got a letter saying, as of this date, your employment is terminated. And my response was, what an opportunity, because I knew that there was something that God had for me that was even better than that, because it doesn't take something from you that's good and give you something that's bad. And plus, he promises that he will supply every need that I have. He will never leave me or forsake me. When I go through deep water, he will be with me. So that was my confidence. So even though I didn't know what it looked like, that was my focus. That's what I chose to focus on.
Are there any more questions or comments, Dave?
No, there are no more questions. I just wanted to share with everybody real quick. Do you have another question, Mr. Mason? Give me
No.
give me like 2 minutes.
Oh, I do have a
Good. Okay.
question.
Okay.
You know, some folks say that this whole question of spirituality and spirit and what we are, and some people believe that we are a collective or an embodiment of all the people and all the things that we have come in contact with. And so I relate that to your car example, because we come in contact with good experiences and bad experiences. How would you define spirit? Some people call it soul.
Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
But I will say this though, that Shakespeare had a quote that I loved. He said, "Nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so."
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is when we're born, we start to have programs put into us, if you will, by our parents, our teachers, our classmates, whatever. So we start to learn what's good and what's bad. And that kind of follows us through life. You know, losing your job is bad. Anybody you ask, losing your job is bad. Having your wife die is bad. Having your arm amputated is bad. But what we've seen is that we can rejoice no matter what our circumstances are, because we know in Romans 8:29, the Bible says that we have been predestined to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. So whatever experiences I go through in this life, whether they're quote unquote good or bad, I know that God is using those experiences. And that's why I can rejoice no matter what my circumstances are. And all of us have the ability to do that.
Well, this has certainly been very educational and inspiring. And I want to give you a big shout out, give you a big hand clap, and
I enjoyed
it. And say thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Mr. Mason, can I share something real quick?
Yes.
Okay,
Please,
I just want to
Dave.
share with everyone real quick. Let me throw this PowerPoint back up. Sorry. All right, these are the books, the 7 books that that Mr. Williams has, and then on the bottom, those are some the online courses that he kind of directed us to, which was VernonLWilliams.com, which are the courses that he has. But those are the 7 books. And before you close out, Mr. Mason, I just wanted to remind everybody next week. All right, hold on a second. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So next week, if you can join us next week, all right, please tell a friend. All right. I think these webinars have been outstanding. I've learned so much over the last. I think this is segment 13 or 14, 12 or 13 here. I've learned so much. But next week, we have President Brown back as a host, and then we got Dr. Lewis here speaking. So join us again next week. And then I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Mason. There we go.
Okay, and I just want to share with the audience, with the attendees, that the next this whole segment, the next 4 or 5 segments, is going to be dealing with this question of spirituality. President Brown and Dr. Tony Lewis next week will continue that discussion. And then after that, for the sisters out there, the next 4 weeks will be sisters talking about this question about spirituality and health. We will have Minister Topaz Bryant. I guess that would be October the 13th with Dr. Tony Lewis. Subsequent to that, we will have we will actually have a sister who's a Hindu spiritual leader. And then we will have 2 other sisters who have attended our conferences in the past, dealing with this whole question, essentially about how we think and how that relates to our health. Vernon, thank you so much. Thank you. Was really insightful, and that I enjoyed it. I enjoy your books, even though I can't pay my mortgage now because
Yeah. Do we need to pass the hat?
Right.
I don't think so.
Right, but it has been very educational and insightful. You know, most people that know me know that I'm always inclined to say it's another blessed day.
It is. It is.
So thank you very much for sharing.
What an opportunity!
What an opportunity! Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you, audience, and share the message. Encourage somebody else to tune in along with you next week, same time, 6 p.m. And thank you.
And thanks so much, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Great show.
Okay.
Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste
You
your
keep
time.
throwing down. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Great. Thank you, President Brown. Thank you, Dave,
Mr.
Jan, Al, everybody else that contributed to this.
Take good care, and thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, it's a phone. Oh, went to a Zoom meeting and a party broke out.
Mr. Williams, we're here next week, so you can use that same link that you used to join today. You can join us next week, and we'd love to have you back as a guest and ask some questions.
Oh yeah, I'm always willing.
All right, well, we'll love to have you with us.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Yeah.
good night.
Be blessed, everybody.